After several African nations kicked France out of their countries, France is falling apart. Now, you probably remember in the past couple of years, many African countries have been kicking the French out of their countries. Now, this included countries like Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali. And things haven't been going well for the French economy ever since. Just last week, the French Prime Minister resigned because he just couldn't fix the economy. So how did we get here? Well, let's dive in. Now, in the late 1900s, many European countries started to leave Africa after they had controlled and colonized it for a couple of hundreds of years. But not France. France left, but only in name. In reality, France was still running things and they still kept control of all of these West African countries. France still controlled 14 countries in Africa. Now, so what France was doing here was that they signed agreements with governments of these countries, either through bribery or through negotiation without actually exposing the downsides of the agreement. So negotiating in bad faith. So these agreements said that these countries needed to keep most of their reserves in the French currency and it needs to be kept in France. And also, now the central bank that ran the currencies of all of these countries had a French representative who had a veto power. Now this means that these countries couldn't make decisions of their own long-term investments because France will always have a veto power to say, no, I don't think you should do that. Now this includes investments inside their own country. So if they wanted to build a road, they wanted to build schools, they couldn't just access their reserves because their reserves, more than half of them, 65%, were kept in France. Now, when the France defend themselves, they said that this benefited these countries because their currencies didn't fluctuate because their currencies were linked to the franc. But this also meant that if things are going bad in France, the currencies of these countries also lose value, which meant that any bad decision that France does will definitely have huge consequences on the currencies and the economies of these countries. So in a nutshell, these countries were propping up the French economy. Now, on top of that, France was also taking a large amount of resources. So 30% of France's uranium that it used to produce electricity was mined in Niger. But more than 90% of the people in Niger didn't even have electricity. Now, there were also mining companies that were coming from France, digging up the gold and buying it at a very cheap amount because remember, they maintained their control of the value of the currency between the franc and those countries' currencies. And then they would take them and then sell them at a higher price to the rest of the world. Now, starting about 5 to 6 years ago, there started to be a resistance in these countries. That's when military coups came in. That's when we saw the rise of people like Ibrahim Traore and other leaders around the region. Now, these leaders, when they came in, they cancelled most of these contracts. But on top of that, they removed that veto power that allowed France to veto anything that these countries wanted to do economically. Now, this came with a huge burden on the French economy. They don't have a way out. People are angry. People are resisting. But something has to be done.
The actual quote, "Without Africa, France will have no history in the 21st century," was actually said by François Mitterrand in 1957. He said it, without Africa, France has no history. They're in the 21st century, which is where we are. Basically saying they're going to go back to the third world. As you can see, anger over budget cuts. They're cutting budget because, and they're increasing taxes because Africa has cut them off. Their main source of income is gone. So now the retirement, look it up. They're going into their retirement. They have no money. France is the second largest economy in Europe, right? Okay. Right now, ask yourself, French people, what has France used to prop up its economy this whole time? What has France used to build the Champs-Élysées and all the... Africa said no. And remember, the French, what was it? There was a French general. He said, if they don't do shit right, within one generation, French people will be going to Africa as immigrants to look for work. It starts now.
Hi guys, welcome to yet another video. It's exciting news and I must say it is. So I always tell you guys, this is the perfect time and it's the best time for an African child to be alive, you know, because when you look at these nations from the West, especially like let's talk about France, how it has been milking and literally downgrading West African countries on how it was controlling their currency, controlling their reserves, controlling their economy, and also pretending like without France, African or these West African nations cannot survive. But then here we are in 2025, guys, 2025. we have leaders that rose up in West Africa, especially when it comes to Ibrahim Traore. He is someone that a lot of African people are so proud of, because he saw that his people were losing. His country was fading. His country was not gaining anything from France. So he started a movement and he was like, you know what, France? Pack up your bags and leave my country. That's why he made or put up a coup to take over the government so that he could be able to do things that are better for people of Burkina Faso. And we are seeing how Burkina Faso is really changing, how people are so happy. Like everywhere Ibrahim Traore goes, people are praising him, and not just in Burkina Faso, but all over Africa. Like all of us see him and we are like, that's the kind of leader that we need in Africa. He's able now to provide jobs for his people. He's able to promote and produce things from his country. He also removed French as an official or national language in Burkina Faso. So you can see that when these African countries decided to fight for their people, they were threatened. I don't know how many times Ibrahim Traore has been threatened to be taken down, because the West is always putting a bad name on him, like he's a dictator, he's a bad person, he's not supporting LGBTQ communities. And I'm like, when has the West ever cared about people of LGBTQ? Because if we look at countries that the Western countries invade, I'm pretty sure they don't care if people or LGBTQ people are, taken down when they drop their bombs or whatever. Like, so you get what I mean, guys.
When this collapse comes, and it's going to come, we in the UK are going to need to have some serious reflection on mistakes that have been made, and especially our foreign policy in history. And we're going to have to rely on these nations that we've been stealing from for years to deal with us, because we need them. We're not like Russia. We're not self-sufficient. Russia has its own oil, its own food, it doesn't have to import anything. It can survive without the world. We, a tiny little island, do not have that luxury. We need to import. That's why we've stolen so much history. So what happens, do you think, in the next decade as African countries are rising and getting more powerful, and the Western countries that had them under their heel for so long, their economies are collapsing? What help do you think we're going to get from those countries that are becoming more powerful? How do you think that the Africans are going to look towards the English with regards to trade deals and buying their uranium off them if we need to? They're not going to look too kindly, are they? Especially if there's absolutely no apologies whatsoever. And as far as I can tell, this country doesn't apologise for jack shit. And the reason it doesn't apologise is because if it apologised for the stuff that it's done, it'd have to start giving back all of the stuff that it's stolen. And we're going to have to, in the West, really start looking at our place in the world and really start looking as to whether we really do value the things that we say we do. I saw somebody earlier saying, this is what the West do. They just play pretend. It's no wonder the West now accept a man being a woman if he just identifies as one.
This is truly powerful, that France is collapsing. For all the time they've been milking African nations, what have they really built for themselves? Nothing. They are now starving. They don't have food. Their people cannot, access things like education, facilities, health. They are losing a lot of things in their country of France, and you can see how crazy they are burning down their country. This is what a lot of African children, African leaders need to see, that when we stand on our ground, these Western nations really cannot survive on their own. Because France has been boosted as this strong economy or powerful nation in Europe, but hey, here we are. Ever since these African nations that they call third world started pulling away and chasing the French away from their countries, we are seeing the collapse of France. And it's truly amazing to see. So who is the liar on this planet? So who needs who? Clearly, it's not the African nations. And the fact that they have a lot of elderly people, I don't know if it's even going to grow any anymore. Like, really, I don't think so.
The gloves are off between Niger and France. See, there's a new era sweeping across West Africa that's called my nationalization, and I got a lot of foreign companies sweating through their pockets. And Niger isn't just some landlocked country, it's sitting on one of the world's most prized mineral, uranium. And not just any uranium, we're talking about the one that keeps France lights on and their nuclear reactor not thriving, humming. And a good chunk of it is found in the Samir mining site in Niger, but here's the issue. Niger doesn't own it. Orano does. Orano is a French multinational nuclear energy company formerly known as Areva, and these guys have operations in Canada, Mongolia, and of course Niger, but don't let the rebrand fool you. The name change won't wash away decades of controversies from environmental destructions, ties to countries that are sanctioned, and financial misconducts. Allegedly, Orano's been through it, but if there's one thing they ain't letting go of, is their grip on Niger's uranium. Because they've been running the Samir site since 1970s, and on paper, they're saying it's mutually beneficial, okay? We own approximately 65%, and you guys own around 35%. But when Chiani's new government checked the receipt, turns out Orano's been pocketing approximately 90% of productions from 1970s all the way to 2024. That's not partnership. That's daylight robbery in slow motion. So what did he do as a result? Late last year, he seized the Samir mining site and didn't just stop right there. Just recently, he made it official that Niger will be nationalizing the entire Samir mining site. Guess who's mad now? Orano. And by the way, they're like 90% owned by the French state. They're calling this a daylight robbery too, because they believe this is politically and systematically motivated to dispossess them, which is why they're going to take legal action and drag international arbitration and probably criminal proceedings against Niger. Anyways, here we are. Clearly the gloves are off. By the way, did you know about 70% of France's electricity comes from nuclear energy? So you mean to tell me uranium from Niger is powering French homes, but not Niger ones? Okay.
France did not see what is happening in West Africa coming. So they find themselves at a time when they are very weak economically, when at home the population of immigrants is growing bigger and bigger. You go to cities such as Marseille, you find Algerians, you find Moroccans, you find Senegalese, you find Guineans, you find Burkinabe, and things are not happening as they used to be then.
France is collapsing and their economy is in shambles, but there is something a lot of people is not telling you. The reason why France is collapsing and their entire civilization is up in flames is because Africa, the continent, is cutting them off. Multiple African countries is cutting off France from their resources. You understand why a handful of African countries seem so poor based on perspective? It is because 90% of their income, of their earnings from their resources goes directly to France, and that stabilizes their economy. Niger, for example, cut off France from their uranium, and now Niger is going to use their uranium for their benefit alone. For the longest time, I have waited for this. I waited for the collapse of Europe and see if they can actually manage to pull through without the resources of Africa. Can Europe actually strive without the colonialism on Africa? Is it possible? We're about to find out. The UK is also facing significant pressure from Nigeria, because Nigeria is thinking about cutting these people off as well. If you ask me, Nigeria should have done that by now. Get rid of teaching French in schools and focus on your own language. Ethiopia just opened up a massive game changer, created one of the biggest dams in the world. The day of European rule is coming to an end, and the rise of Africa is finally upon us. I think it's about that time to go back home. I think it's time. But first, a couple things. The civil war in South Sudan and the war that is happening in the Congo. That needs to end ASAP. And all the other conflicts that is happening within the African continent in these African countries needs to be settled immediately. Italy, Roma, Spain, they're all facing the pressure of being cut off or already cut off from African resources. Ladies and gentlemen, colonialism is coming to an end, and I couldn't be happier. Yes. Now we just gotta wait for America to cut off Africa and we'll be golden. That's all I gotta say in the matter. It's Onyx and I'm gone.
Africa is the only reason why Western Europeans get to enjoy such a high quality of life, especially for France. They brag about being able to live well even though they don't have to work as hard as Americans, but they omit the fact that all that comfort they enjoy comes off of the back of African resources and labor. England, Portugal, Germany, Belgium, Italy, and France all made a massive scramble for Africa in the 1880s, and France by far still has their foot in their old colonial ways. Even though these African nations have declared their independence, France and a couple other countries are still exploiting them, and they have given nothing in return to these African nations. They have built very little in infrastructure and construction. They have given next to nothing compared to how much they have taken to support their ways. Out of the 8 African coups that have happened since 2020, 7 of them were from French colonies. The French do not know how to build, they do not know how to innovate, they do not know how to grow democracy in any part of the world, which is why for the past 60, 70 years, they have just had French puppets that were ruling these African countries that finally got sick of how they were being treated. China has only taken an interest in Africa for 30 or 40 years, yet they have built more industry and infrastructure than all of the other European countries combined. So of course, the African nations are going to have a much more favorable disposition towards China, since they are the ones who are actually building factories, roads, bridges, hospitals. China is actually divesting a lot of their own resources to make this possible. You guys know how I feel about a lot of Chinese policy, but they did hit the nail on the mark when it comes to Africa. It is pretty clear that Russia's Wagner forces have had a lot to do with the coups that have taken place in Gabon, Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso. And even though the Russians aren't trying to actually help anyone, I believe they are trying to foment chaos and destabilize a lot of positions in the West. This can be an overall good thing for Central Africa. Even though the Russians' goal is to create a lot of instability for the West, this instability can spread to a lot of other African countries, and that can actually hurt a lot of China's positions there. Make no mistake, despite what you're seeing in the media, the US will find a way to exploit whatever is happening in Africa. At first, they seemed that they were very pro taking down the Niger coup, and now they've kind of backed off, and they said that they are going to respect the current government. Though a lot of these African nations don't have a favorable viewing of the United States, the US will always find a way to profit off of whatever instability is caused. If there is going to be a disruption in the energy supply, I will bet you that the US will make money selling its liquid natural gas and oil. If there is going to be widespread war, the US is going to make a lot of money selling its weapons. I would not put it past the United States interests to have their cake and eat it too. They may be happy about China building all of this infrastructure because that means the US doesn't have to. It means the US doesn't have to invest in anything to make Africa more prosperous and rich, but they can reap all of the benefits for when that actually happens. In my opinion, I think that every Western interest should be kicked out of every African country and then reintroduced as a potential trading partner among peers with equal standing, instead of these African nations having to deal with the West like guaranteed exploiters.
Fam, the tension between France and Mali is getting worse. You remember this guy on the screen, right? This guy, Yann Vezelier, that's French spy who was caught in Mali plotting to destabilize the country, together with some top Malian generals and some sub-officers. You remember him, right? So for over the weeks, it's been more than a month now since he was arrested and locked up in detention in Mali. France thought it was like usual, right? You know, when they send their scouts to go commit crime, to go do their dirty job, when they are caught, they make a phone call and the next day they're released. They did not know that things have changed this time around. So for more than a month, they have been calling Bamako to get their boy back. You know, they have been, doing everything to get back their dude. And Mali said, we are not handing him over to you. He is a criminal and he is supposed to go through a trial process and he is supposed to be punished according to the laws of Mali. So because of the back and forth for more than a month now, yesterday, Emmanuel Macron decided to declare 2 Malian diplomats at Malian embassy in France persona non grata, giving them till Saturday to leave France. With immediate effect, General Assimi Goïta expelled 5 French diplomats from French embassy in Mali immediately without wasting any time. He reciprocated immediately without wasting any single second. That dude, it's time for France to know that that era has passed, at least with the Sahel countries. He can do that crap with other puppet countries in Africa, right? Not with the AES. That time has passed. So guys, it is really amazing to see the way our Sahelian heroes are standing tall to French dictatorship. That time has passed. It has passed and it's gone. No more room for foul play in the Sahel region, and you think you're going to go scot-free. If you try any crap and you are caught, whether you are from America or from France or from Europe as a whole or wherever you're coming from, you are going to face the laws of Mali, and you are going to be punished according to the laws. That is it. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section. And hey, kudos to General Assimi Goïta. We salute you, sir. And Africa is right behind you. The people of Africa, the youths of Africa are right behind you.
France is spending over 500 billion euros per year on welfare. That's over 30% of the entire economy spent on people who are not working and are not contributing to the system at all. Yet the Prime Minister had the courage to come out yesterday proposing to cut 2 public holidays to address the debt issue, because France is drowning in debt. They have a debt to GDP of over 120%, and they're running annual deficits of around 6%. That's wartime deficits. So the only real or viable solution the government has at this point is to cut on spending, which of course they don't want to do, because why would you stop spending somebody else's money? So they're coming out with these gimmicks of cutting public holidays, and they're eventually going to come with a proposal to hike taxes even more, which France really cannot do because they already have one of the highest tax burdens in the entire European Union and developed world for that matter. So there is only one viable solution for France. That is actually cutting on spending, or the alternative, which will be very costly for French citizens, is to monetize the debt. To go to the ECB and ask for more money to monetize their debt.
Do you ever wonder why the projects is called the projects? Before I get into why, have y'all heard about what Africa did to France? I'm not sure if you're aware, but African countries have been pulling their resources and removing Western powers and people from their resources and their lands, like for the past year and some change. A lot of people may know about Burkina Faso, but this is actually about the effect. That shit is working. The French government is collapsing because it can't sustain itself without Africa. That's what's happening right now, 2025. But back into it. The projects is called the projects because that's exactly what it was. It was one of many projects that was fulfilled by the Works Progress Administration. And a lot of people don't know that the projects was actually built to house white people. And at one point, black people were not allowed to live in the projects. Of course, a lot of these projects were built during the Great Depression, and a lot of people were affected by the Great Depression. But if you can imagine, the government did not care about the black ones, they cared about the white ones. So they built a lot of different housing developments that we now call projects to help house those people. And they did it with funds that were supposed to be allotted for black housing. But of course, we all know how that goes. But yeah, did y'all know about this?
So now that Africa, 14 countries in Africa has cut France totally off. They told France that they will not be sending them no 85% of their income. They will not be doing it. They've been doing that shit since 1959, and they will no longer be doing it. France thought that Africa was playing. And no, they weren't. Because now France, their economy is tanking big time. They are in such a deficit. Their country is just falling. It's burning right now. It hasn't even been 3 months, and they can't pay their bills. Those 14 countries in Africa is putting France fucking out of business. And that's only 14 countries. You know, Africa has 52 or 53. What is France gonna do? And Africa don't even want to make no deals. They don't even want to work with them. They don't want to do shit. They're done. They're finished. It's over with. We don't want to talk to y'all no more. Them 14 countries are trying to get the other countries to just start pulling back too. So France is falling. France is falling, y'all.
So guys, as you've seen, that is what people said. I don't know, I can't add more on this. Thanks for watching. I hope African nations can really rise up and push away every European, every Western nation from Africa, so we can get really the freedom that we need. And who knows, in the future it will be Europeans coming to Africa to get jobs and look for jobs. It is possible if we make it happen and stand on the ground as West African nations are doing. Guys, I'll see you in another video. Bye.